Hello and welcome once again to an exciting episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Drake and Marie. I am one of the co-hosts. My name is Max Alexander Drake, or Drake as everybody calls me. I'm an award-winning novelist. I was the former lead fiction writer for a massive game from Sony. I'm hopefully signing a contract with another video game that I can't talk about at all in the next couple of weeks. My co-host Marie is with us.
Hi, my name is Marie Mullaney, and I am a fantasy author. My books, The Sangwheel Chronicles, are available on Amazon, and I run a world building channel called Just in Time Worlds.
All right. Okay. So as always, and I know you hear this in every other video and podcast and everything else, but it really is that important. If you like what we're doing, the only way you have to do to support us, you don't have to buy our products, although it's nice. But really, the free thing that you can do that takes very little effort on your part is just to click subscribe, click the notification bell. If you're on whatever podcast you're listening to, add us to your favorites list. All right, so let's get into this. So today, we're going to talk about the main topic that we're going to be talking about is symbolism and allegories and kind of just different ways to deliver information to the audience. A little bit of subtext probably is going to creep into the conversation. But before we get into that, we do want to do another one of our trope sessions where we talk about a trope, and actually it's going to be kind of a twofer because one trope kind of leads into the other trope. So we're going to start by talking about the trope of hanging the lampshade. And it's a very interesting trope. It's not one, so this is going to be an interesting discussion because me and Marie are probably a little bit on different sides on this and just kind of the way we look at it and the way we see it. So Marie, why don't you kind of explain what you see the trope as and kind of maybe.
So lampshading is a trope where you hang a lampshade on something that is unusual to the character, something that has the potential to draw the reader out of the narrative, because it's like too many things are happening to the character at once, or he's meeting too many crime bosses, or whatever the case is. And then you hang a lampshade on it by having the character comment on how unusual this is. And that allows the reader to acknowledge that actually, yes, that is unusual, and then remain within the narrative because, you know, they're not being told you have to buy that this is normal.
And that's actually the way I've understood the trope, is that you're doing something in your story that actually is so far-fetched that maybe the audience is going to have a hard time suspending disbelief to believe in it. And I think that's probably why I don't cotton to this trope so much, because first of all, I'm writing fantasy and epic fantasy on top of that. So, you know, everything is kind of far-fetched. But I don't know. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. Can you get more far-fetched than, oh, by the way, the president who also, you know, led the Civil War to free slavery, he also hunted down vampires in his spare time. I mean, that's kind of out there, but I still don't think so. I still wouldn't hang a lampshade on that and go, you know, whatever. Because I kind of feel, for me, it's, if you are the type of reader that's gonna be like, oh, I'm going to buy this book called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer, and then I'm going to get into it and go, really? The president back in that time was hunting vampires? That's just too insane for me. I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't read fiction. Like, maybe you should just be an accountant and crunch numbers and never use your imagination at all, because you obviously don't have any. And so, like, it just seems weird to me about that.
So I've hung 2 lampshades in Sangwheel Chronicles. The first is in Hidden Blade, right at the end of the book, when the reader finds out who Louis is and who herself is and so on. Then I have Raoul comment, or Falk comment, that it's like I didn't even know you. Because I'm also acknowledging, for the reader's sake, that yes, it does look like a change of pace, right? Because there wasn't much, there was a couple of signs as to who and what Louis is, but not like a lot, you know. So it's kind of an acknowledgement of that.
I feel like, again, depends on the definition that we're looking at. So for my definition, that doesn't fit at all.
Okay.
That's a character that had one impression of the world
Mm.
And then new information came along that shattered that character's impression of the world. And so the character is organically kind of commenting on it. So yeah, again, it just depends on your definition of lampshading is a lot kinder than mine is. Mine is that you're a crappy writer and you're doing crappy things. And so then to kind of get away with it, you point out, it's almost like a self-deprecating type of writing style where you're like, I'm a crappy writer, and look, I'm a crappy writer. I want to show you I'm a crappy writer. I'm pointing it out so that you will then forgive me for being a crappy writer.
So I think that like most tropes, lampshading can be used well, or it can be used like crap, right? It's like a lot, like there are tropes like insta-love. You could use insta-love to tell a great story, or you could use it like crap and tell a really bad story. So it does depend on how you apply it. And I feel the same way about lampshading. Like in the Dresden Files, Jim Butcher uses lampshading quite a bit to point out kind of all of the, crime bosses that Harry meets and all of the femme fatales he meets. And like he meets a lot of those kinds of people, right, over the course of the 16 books.
Right. And you can't have a series that long.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're not going to have like the 7th book be Dresden washing laundry.
No, of course not. Like as Ryan George says in pitch meetings, the story has to happen. Absolutely. But it sometimes is worth having a character just point out that something is unusual and kind of maybe validating a little bit for the reader that, yes, there's a lot going on, or yes, your worldview has suddenly changed fundamentally by new information that has also been introduced to the character. So it gives the reader a moment of like feeling like, oh yes, I can relate to how this character is feeling.
And that's funny because by my definition, I've never lampshaded. Now, I'm not saying that I've never written anything horribly that should be pointed out that was written horribly. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I've never pointed it out. Yeah. So by my definition, I have never, ever hung a lamp. But by your definition, I do it all the time, not just twice, in 2 books, because I'll do it. So, but I don't call it lampshading, and I don't see it as lampshading in my mind. The way I see it is anticipating what the reader is feeling at the moment that they're reading. So like, as an example, one of the things that I've done more than once is I'll have a long dialogue scene, and maybe the narrating character is the one delivering the dialogue. And I'll get to that point where I feel like this is it. This is the audience is no longer going to, I've kind of reached the limit, even though I might still have some things that should organically been said in this conversation. I feel like I've pushed the bounds of what the reader is going to tolerate for this moment. And I'll have the narrating character say, but you know what? I'm going on way too long. Let's do something. Let's change whatever. Or most of the time it's that the narrating character is listening. And so they will go, dear God, this is going on way too long. I am like, that's it. I can't take anymore. And it's really just me anticipating what the reader is feeling, because to me, what that does is it makes the reader go, I was feeling that too. I'm just like this character. And it just connects them to the character just that much deeper. So I do it all the time, not just with conversations, but with events or with whatever, where the character's just like, I feel like the reader's going to be feeling something. And so I'll just go ahead and let the character actually feel that exact same thing. Because to me, it doesn't hang a lampshade on. In other words, go, hey, look at my crappy writing. I want to point that out in a self-deprecating way so that you'll forgive me, and we can just ha, and overlook the fact that I was a crappy writer, but more of a, I was feeling that. Wow. And I try to do it right before they realize it themselves, so that it's more like oh my goodness, I was feeling that way. I didn't even realize it. So
lampshading to me is when you do that, when you anticipate that the reader is going to be feeling this, and what you anticipate, but specifically what you anticipate they're going to be feeling is a moment of doubt, or a moment of like, is this still the world I'm in? Am I still in the right place? Because your worldview has been shattered. So when that is the feeling you anticipate the reader feeling, and you then hang a lampshade there by having a by saying, yes, that is how you should be feeling right now. You should be feeling that right now.
And see, I'm more, you dropped the YouTube show Pitch Sessions. So for those who don't know, he's playing two roles. He's playing an executive who's taking a pitch for a new project, and then he's playing the writer who's pitching it. So like in the Twilight ones, he's pitching the Twilight. And like one of the things he says, so next what happens is she goes into high school and all the boys just fall in love with her instantly. And the executive's like, okay, so why does that happen? What about her that attracts them to? Oh, well, she's the main character. That's why everyone's in love with her. And because literally there's no reason. She is this bland, vanilla, tasteless, nothing of a character. So why does anybody even see her when she walks in the door? Oh, she's the main character. Oh, right. She's the main character. Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. He is actually picking on the fact that these are bad writing tropes that you're using, and you're using them over and over and over again throughout the entire productions.
And I mean, his lines from the pitch sessions have just become iconically part of.
Yeah.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Yeah. Yeah. So we set up this villain, and he's going to be the big bad, and he's going to be almost impossible to kill. And the executive's like, "Oh, really? Wow, that sounds going to be like a really, big deal for the main characters." No, not at all. It's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience. They just pop his head off in one scene, and then they move on. And like, oh, okay, well, that sounds kind of unfulfilling. And it's like, well, it's in the script, and then they just keep going on. I think my favorite is when the executive is like, and wait a minute, that sounds like a terrible idea. Why are we doing that? And the writer's like, because we make a lot of money doing it. And they're like, oh, right, money. I like money. Yeah, let's keep. He's doing the thing that I do in my writing. My writers groups. In my writer group, I always say, never attack the writer, only attack the work. We are here to attack the writing, not the writer. And so by saying, why do all the boys fall in love with Bella when she comes into class? Because she's the main character, is just pointing out that the writing is bad. It's not a dig on Stephanie Myers. It's not, a dig on vampires or the genre or anything like that. You're just not a good writer because you did it.
And I don't think any lampshading could have made Bella in any way a savable character. I don't care if you hung 50 lampshades on how boring she is, it would not have saved that character.
Actually, I'll disagree with that. Now, she didn't do it, but the pitch session for Twilight is the only reason why I actually even like Twilight, is because, it's like 18 minutes long where you go through all the movies, and they are hilarious. Like I've watched them multiple times. I've sent them to multiple friends. That is one giant lamp, because that's really what it is. It's a lampshade. It's just that it wasn't done by, the people who created Twilight. It was done by somebody else. I still love his, the first Star Wars movie that was made after Disney took it. And he's like, what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to have an orphan on a desert planet that finds a droid that has a bunch of, secret information the Empire needs, and is going to, happen to find a plane to leave on, which will happen to be the Millennium Falcon, which will happen to be will happen to run into Han Solo right after that, even though he has lost his Millennium Falcon like 10 years ago. He happens to run into him right then. And then, it goes all the way up to, and then they happen to blow up the Death Star because they, that's even bigger than the original Death Star, because it happens to have a weakness and a port that they can take advantage of and all that. And the executive's like, wait a minute, that sounds like all of that has been done before. Like, isn't that going to make anybody mad? And they're like, no, we'll just call it fan service and it'll be fine. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that works. And it's just like, it didn't work. Exact same movie in every aspect. So it was just bad writing. It was bad. One of my favorite hanging the lampshades would be Witcher. So, you had season 1, which was fantastic, except for everybody's like, but I don't understand. Like, you see this scene. Right. You see the scene where this guy takes an arrow to the eye, and then the next scene, he's courting somebody and getting ready to get married. And you're like, wait a minute, did they use the same actor for 2 different roles? What the crap is going on? Because they give you nothing. They give you and it doesn't even enhance the story, the fact that they threw everything out of chronological order. And so in season 2, they actually do have a scene where they're like, hey, it's not like we would do something, it was one of the storytellers that's in the world, the bard. And he's like, it's not like I would do something terrible, like tell a story out of chronological order for no value whatsoever. Like, literally that made season 2 for me, when that bard picked on season 1 of Witcher. And so that was a self-deprecating, hey guys, we messed up. We admit that we messed up. We won't do that again. We learned from our mistake. And they did enough right to make season 1 still, especially if you understand that it's not in chronological order. Like, that's the thing. Even though it had no value whatsoever to the story. So it was a dumb idea. But they could, I mean, even you just put the date, like 300 years before the last scene that you just saw, 50 years after the last scene you just saw. Like, give me some reference. Like, at least so we were just talking about offline, we were talking about the House of Dragon. And one of the things I feel they made a mistake on was the time jumping. I just don't think you're making a whole new story, a whole new world. You're not really beholden to all this stuff. Make a story that's going to just be linear and not have these weird, 6, so between the first and second one, it's like 6 months. Between the second and third, it's like 2 years. My understanding is, because that's all I've only watched the first 2 because I'm way behind. But my understanding is at some point they jump like 10 or 12 years because they actually take the girl that was playing the 16-year-old girl and just replace her with a new actress because she's like 30 now. You can't obviously have a girl that looks 16 playing a 30-year-old. So that's weird to me because I don't see, now I'm behind, so I don't know 100%. But as of right now, I don't feel there's a value to it. But they were pretty damn clever in how they jumped in each one of them. I remember there was something for the 6-month one. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think the first one ends with him macking on the little 9-year-old girl because they were trying to marry him off. And then later he's like, well, if 6 months ago you had just married the little 9-year-old girl, you'd be in a lot better shape. So, I mean, it was something like that. I don't remember exactly. But in the second one, I remember it was one of the opening scenes, or it may have been the opening scene. And there's an advisor to the king talking to him that I had never seen. I'm like, where'd this punk come from? Like, I already had been introduced to the court and he wasn't one of them. And then he goes, well, I mean, sir, it has been 2 years. And so it just made me go, oh, that was actually clever to use a character that I had never seen before to kind of let me know that, well, obviously people are going to come and go during 2 years. While I think they've done it clever so far, again, I'm only 2 episodes in, or I guess I'm 3 episodes in now. It's still, as of yet, I haven't seen a value for it. And so when you do something like that and you're actually taking a chance of losing a lot of your mass market viewership, which is where the money comes from.
The lampshading thing that we spoke about and the pitch meetings and Twilight leads us quite nicely into symbolism.
Yeah. Although we did skip, I said we were going to do 2 tropes, but we kind of skipped it, which is fine. So I'll just say that I lied to you guys in the beginning.
Yeah, we just lied. Sorry.
Right.
We're terrible people.
We'll do that other.
We're lampshading. We're lampshading that we lied to you. So
there you go.
so symbolism in stories is basically where and analogies and so on is where you're using one thing to represent another thing, or where your use of colors, like for example in The Great Gatsby, you have the color green being a symbolic tie back to money and all of the effects around it, and of course The Great Gatsby's theming is all around money and wealth and so on.
And in The Sixth Sense we have red for death.
Yeah. So and that kind of tie-in then becomes a thing that your readers can utilize. Now, the thing with symbolism is there's 2 things, in my opinion. The one is you can be too heavy-handed with it. So you can only really pull off symbolism if you're subtle about it, right? So but it can't come out of nowhere. So you still have to like, it still has to be a recurring thread. It's got to be a thing that happens all the time, but you have to be subtle about it.
But even still, like, and maybe it's just that I'm not very smart, because I will admit that every single day. But like the Sixth Sense with the red, I never would have, because I also don't pick up on those things. So it's actually funny. One of the games we play often at Drake's Game Night, I do a game night for 8, 10, 12 people every month. And one of the games we play is called Mysterium, which is basically just a really cool version of Clue. but one person is ghost and you can't talk, which is why everyone likes me to be the ghost, because I'm not allowed to talk during the game. But we give these things called vision cards, and they just have these weird pictures and swirls and colors and different things. And so the other players are you're basically a psychic, and I'm trying to get you to figure out who the killer was and what they used and in what room, and I'm using these vision cards to do it. And it's so funny, new players, because they were all talking to each other and I'm just not allowed to talk, and they're all like, well, there's a lot of green in this one, and there's a green in this thing over here, and I'm just going, guys, I might as well be colorblind. I literally don't use colors for anything. Like, and more experienced players that have been playing with, they're like, I'm pretty sure he doesn't use colors for anything, so I would ignore all the color stuff. I'm like, yeah, that guy knows. You need to go with that, because I don't, like, it just doesn't mean stuff to me. So it's just, you gotta, I don't know, you gotta think. It's sort of like what we were talking about before this. I love the whole, you got the literary class professor who's like, well, obviously in this book, the reason why they chose this, texture to describe the curtains was because it's symbolic of the, the nature of man back in the, prehistoric times. And the writer's like, yeah, dude, I just had to describe, he touched the curtain, so I had to describe what that felt like. And literally, I just reached over on my living room and I touched my curtain, and that's what I described. So I'm glad you got all this extra stuff out of it, but I just was describing the curtains in my house.
So the most egregious, and that's a beautiful word, isn't it? Egregious.
Yes.
The most egregious use I've seen of that exact thing is actually with Twilight. So I recently read or watched, I can't remember, a commentary on Twilight where they said, okay, yes, Twilight was bad, but remember that it's actually a paranormal romance, not an actual fantasy story. So you need to remember that. Fine. So you need to judge it as a romance. And the second comment I made is like, everybody says that Bella is boring. Yes, Bella is boring. And then the guy said a very interesting thing. He said, it is by design, because Bella has no trays, so that the teenage girls at whom Twilight is aimed at can self-insert themselves into Bella without conflicting with her character, which they couldn't do if she was a strongly written character. Which I was like, okay, that's interesting, but I don't think Stephanie Meyers wrote it like that. I don't think she wrote it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she did.
So I've actually heard that explanation for decades, pretty much since the books came out, and I call BS on that, because first of all, you're right, I don't think Stephanie Meyers is that strong of a writer to have come up with that. Second of all, literally not a writing theory that anyone has ever said ever in the history of writing stories. No one has ever said, I mean, we say, oh, you got to be immersive, or oh, you got to use subtext, or oh, you got to, make your characters feel real, or oh, you got to connect your characters to the reader. No one has ever said, you know what you really need to do? You need to write such a bland character that literally has no value, traits, humanity, is literally a soulless husk. And the reason why you want to do it this way is so that the reader can imprint themselves on that. Never has that theory been, ever put forward in the history of writing. No, that is not a theory of writing. No one would ever say that. No one would ever agree to that. So to say that that's it's sort of like, well, yeah, Anakin murdered 300 children, but it was good. It was actually good that he murdered these children, because, Palpatine took him out for ice cream afterwards. And so, that was the reason for it. And none of that's off screen, and you guys didn't see that, but it was really good ice cream. It was actually, Cold Stone ice cream, which is really expensive and really good ice cream. And so you guys just didn't get that, but it was on purpose. He killed the 200 children because of the ice cream. Like, no, he didn't. So I can't cotton to that, because it's so ludicrous to think about writing a character on purpose to be completely vanilla and completely bland and soulless, so that your reader can put themselves into the character's shell.
I tend to agree with you there.
I call BS on that every single time somebody's brought it up.
I mean, we can disagree on a lot of things. My problem with Twilight is, I think, the same as most people's problem with Twilight. I am so not the target audience.
Right. I always say that Twilight absolutely deserves to be the success that it was. period. It literally does everything that it should do to impact its target audience. And not only did it impact its target audience, the biggest reason why it should be a success is it did what Harry Potter did, you know, what the Bible did, what any massively successful book, what Star Wars has done. It crushed readerships. So not only did it take the 16 to 17-year-old girls and make them giddy, but for whatever reason, and I'm not one, but it made 35 to 45-year-old housewives giddy. And so it crossed from one readership to another, and it got two massive fan bases. And anytime you can do that, and it's a lot of luck, I don't think you can plan for this stuff, but anytime you can do that, you absolutely deserve what you got. And it's because, and I've said this before, I don't know if on this podcast, but when I teach at romance conference, I'll say it in front of the entire audience. Romance has the huge benefit of the fact that its fan base is the most forgiving readership that exists. Like, they will allow you to be a horrible writer, to be a horrible storyteller, as long as you give them the feeling that they're looking for. Right. As long as you give them the feeling that they're looking for, they're happy. Epic fantasy fans, like, you put out 200,000 word book that has a missed comma somewhere in it, and they will go into your house and stone you to death. They're like, how dare you do this horrid writing? It's like, I missed one comma and 200,000 words. Yes. And you will die for that. Like, it's just a very unforgiving fan base. Whereas romance, and again, Twilight deserves to be a success. I will pick on Twilight until the day I die because it's terrible, but I will never pick on the fact that it should absolutely have deserved the success. And same thing with 50 Shades of Grey. That's a literary abortion, and yet it absolutely deserves to have been a success because it gave the audience what they were looking for.
I would wish that it had somewhat of a better depiction of relationships, because
Certainly.
Honestly, I have seen a lot of toxic relationships in various forms, on screen, in books, but 50 Shades of Grey, the toxicity of that relationship was just, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. So bringing that back to allegories and symbolism and maybe even a little bit of subtext, when you write like that is where that's the antithesis of using these techniques. When you're such a poor writer that you can't even write a good character, much less a good plot, you're never going to be able to do depth in your writing. And I think that's where it's at, especially subtext. Subtext is one of those things. I actually popped my son. My son is incredibly intelligent. Like, he's the smartest person in any room that he's in. And I'm not being exaggerating. I'm not being a father like, I don't know. Like, he literally is just insanely intelligent, but that comes at a cost. And one of those costs is common sense. And so I can't remember what he said, but he said something the other day, and then he explained it. And it was like, dude, like, I got all of that from subtext. Like, you did not need to explain what you just explained. He's like, oh, okay. Because again, he's not going to see the subtext as easily as maybe someone that's a little dumber than him, like me, is going to pick up on that subtext, because everything is very factual for him, and everything is very much. So if I say, oh no, I really like working here, it's my favorite thing in the world to do, he'll be like, oh, okay, I'm glad you like it. That's really awesome. And it's like, no. So it was something like that. It wasn't that bad, but it was something like that where he was like, now I know he's saying these words, but he really hates working there. Just letting you know that. It's like, yeah, no, I got that. It's all good. So, like I said, it wasn't that bad because he actually he's not like complete. He is definitely on the spectrum at some point, but he's not that deep on the spectrum. But yeah, so when you're not a good writer and you can't do these nuanced characters and you can't do this stuff, you're going to miss being able to do stuff like, although you don't have to be a great writer to write allegories.
Terry Pratchett?
Well, I think Terry Pratchett's an amazing writer, though.
Yes.
I think he's a brilliant writer and a brilliant.
I fully agree, but I think we should talk about him in the context of this show. If we're talking allegories and symbolism, because Terry Pratchett used, and man, that was a loss to the world when he died. But Terry Pratchett used symbolism beautifully, because he was tying things back to the real world, because he was a satirical writer, right?
Right.
So satirical writers have to do that, yeah, because you are writing a satirical commentary on the world. So he tied his people back to things that are happening in the world, and he made that link clear for the reader and then told the story.
But it wasn't just even the characters, like going postal, the entire world, the job, the you know, what the character ends up having to do, and the calling that he gets, you know, the inciting incident that pulls him into the story. All of that was commentary on what we go through on a daily basis, the average Joe, you know, punching a clock and doing our job. It literally is the whole world, the whole everything, you know, the bureaucracy tape that you have to deal with in that story. And it's all hilarious, and it's all stupid, it's all funny. And I mean, there's an orangutan that helps with the post, and like it literally is a magical world. So it's really crazy and stupid. But yeah, the whole, like, I don't think he stopped with just characters just a magic thing. Like, everything about his stuff was just this beautiful, symbolic, allegory laced thing that has so many different levels of depth.
To the day I die, I will remember Vimes's explanation of the problem of poverty, right? With the boots, because a poor man can only afford $10 boots, and they only last a year, where a rich man pays $50 for a pair of boots and they last him 10 years. So a poor man has to buy, you know, a new pair every year. And that's the problem with poverty, is you don't have the money to buy the more durable goods. And it's such a lucid, clear explanation given to you in the context of the story without feeling preachy.
Right.
Which is the other big problem with allegories, right? So you can overuse them and be too blunt, or you can be too preachy.
And my two examples of that my two go-tos will always be, done well, you get V for Vendetta if it's done correctly, and you get Lord of the Flies when it's too heavy-handed. You know, they're both, and the reason why I like using this, because not only they're both external thematic elements, and we haven't really talked about this on the podcast much, but most mass market is internal, where the theme is raging inside of the main character, and the character has to make the decision. So Luke Skywalker has to decide to use faith or technology to blow up the Death Star. Choose right, win. Choose bad, lose. An external thematic element, which are why they're not as successful with the mass market, is that the world is the one making the decision, which means the characters, when you go with an external thematic story arc, the characters are all allegories. So like in Lord of the Flies, Jack is not a little boy. He is an allegory for all humans are born evil. And Ralph is not a little boy. He's an allegory for all humans are born good. And the problem with allegory characters is they can't change, they can't grow, there's no arc. And that's why it still is more esoteric and harder for the mass market to swallow, because you can't relate to an allegory. You can't relate to a character that is all humans are born evil. And then same thing on V for Vendetta, but they cheated. But on V for Vendetta, you have V that's an allegory for it is better to give up safety for freedoms. And you have the government that's an allegory for, and especially the main leader of the government, who's an allegory for it is better to give up liberties for personal safety. And these two can't change. And then it's the world who has to, at the end of it, be asked, which side do you want to? Same thing on Lord of the Flies. You have the boys are the ones that have to make the decision. You know, we just killed Piggy. Did we go too far? And are we good people? Or did we like, no, that's cool, screw Piggy, and now let's kill Ralph? And so the world has to decide. Where they did such a brilliant job with V for Vendetta is you had Vi, and I hate the fact that they have two V's in it. Like, you should have come up with like Susan for her name. You make it a little bit different, but she is the reader. Now, she doesn't make a decision at the end. She doesn't, again, she's not Luke Skywalker deciding between faith and technology and blowing up the Death Star. She's an observer. but that's still a window for the audience to put themselves in, to be able to watch this decision between the two allegoric sides, and then the world, because it's the world, you know. And for those who haven't seen it, you might not get this, but for those that have either seen the movie or watched the graphic or read the graphic novel, which I've done both, you have the army of the military standing there saying, no, if you come to us, we're going to kill you. And you have the people that are like, we're going to now fight the government. What you can't have happen is you can't have a battle. You can't have the citizens revolt. It's a different story. So literally we're talking about, you know, because if they had revolted, now you're taking other people's liberties from them. So you're both losing freedom and safety. And so they peacefully walk through the government, and the government has to decide, do we shoot them? Which means they are trying to give up their safety for liberties, and we're not going to give them either, which means it's better to have safety than liberties. Or do we change and allow them to peacefully come through us and basically start a new government without any guns, you know, shots being fired? And so that's what the character that you get to be. I'm pretty sure her name is Vi. I could be wrong on that, but anyway, you can tell us down in the comments below if I'm wrong on that. I could walk over there and just grab the graphic novel, but I'm not going to. But, you know, I think that's what helps make V for Vendetta more mass market successful than Lord of the Flies was, because you still have that vehicle that the mass market can put themselves in and kind of watch. And not just watch. She's not a passive. She's not like Jack Carraway. Is it Jack Carraway? Whatever his name is in Great Gatsby. I know his last name is Carraway. But anyway, he's a peripheral narrator. So he definitely is, you know, because Vi isn't a peripheral narrator.
Yeah, she's in
and that's right. That's also very interesting. You know, when you look at story structure, when you look at Carraway's character, where he literally just watches the Great Gatsby and he goes along with it, and you know, he's there in the room when they're macking on the chicks, but he's not really participating other than just being there. Whereas and the difference is because remember, the narrator is what the reader connects to. So I'm pretty sure it's Jack Carraway, but anyway, you connect to Jack Carraway and you're just sitting there watching stuff. Whereas with Vi, you are forced to go through the brainwashing rituals. You are forced to almost get raped. You are forced to watch this bad stuff happening and experience this stuff. So she's not just a peripheral narrator, which is a really interesting. I know I'm geeking out here on story structure, but when you really study this stuff gets really, really interesting on these decisions and why. And why is that important to me? Because I want to know why V for Vendetta is more mass market successful than Lord of the Flies, since they're both external story arcs. So like they shouldn't be different. They're both esoteric. And so when you start looking at them, and same thing with why is V for Vendetta more mass market successful than Great Gatsby even? And again, it's because you're kind of using a peripheral narrator in V for Vendetta, but you're really not, because she's also affected by the world and by the story, even though she doesn't make a decision at the end to overcome the story, just like Carraway doesn't.
On a brief rabbit chase of story structure, I was recently researching vampires for a world building video, and I reread Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't know if you've actually read the book.
I've read it. It's old English, so those are hard for me to read.
So the weird thing about Bram Stoker's Dracula is you don't actually connect to the characters because of the way the book is presented. Because the book is presented as journal entries and newspaper clippings and things like that. And as the reader, it's almost like it's written for the second person. You are literally discovering the plot by reading these articles. You know, but you can only write that if you have a really strong plot. Right. because you are literally dependent on the reader being so invested in finding out more about the plot that they are reading for the plot.
Right.
But it's a very interesting choice, and Bram Stoker's Dracula has certainly stood the test of time. You know, it's still a popular book.
I don't know if it's ever been a popular book.
Well, it's influenced a lot. It is the grandfather of all vampire.
But there's a difference in a book that is read by a few that then is used to make bigger, you know, projects that reach a deeper mass market audience, as opposed to the original. because like The Great Gatsby, also very influential on a lot of different things, but it is not widely read, mostly read by people who are required to read it in college. Now, I read it. It's one of the few books. I mean, there's only been a handful of books from that era that I can actually read. You know, everybody should know this by now. I never went to college, so I was never forced to read anything. So like I tried, I went on a, you know, about a 15-year journey down the classics, and I read the first couple of pages of lots of them, Moby Dick and, you know, whatever. I mean, there's just dozens and dozens I can't remember the names of books that people are required to read and do book reports on that I've read at least the first couple of pages on. And then that's it. Because I'm like, well, no one's forcing me to read this and it sucks and I'm not going to read it. But like Great Gatsby is one of those that was good, and I kept reading it. I mean, not to today's standards, but still good enough to keep me invested in wanting to read it. Same thing with 1984. Bram Stoker's is one of those that I've read the first couple of pages of, and like, no, I'll just, like I said, I'll just watch the Keanu Reeves movie and just be done with it. So there is a difference in that, and I think a lot of people miss that. They think that because these things have stood the test of time, that it means that they are really great literature. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that they are really good at influencing and other creators to create other things. And then you get this snowball effect that I guarantee you a lot of people that are doing, even not the sparkly vampire bull crap that is so popular today, but like vampires where the vampires were the villains. They were unholy apparitions of death and terror. They probably never even read Bram Stoker's at all, but they were influenced on people who were influenced by that. And so you get this snowball effect where it influences people that then create stuff that then influence other people that create stuff that influence other people. And I guarantee you, I've never done this, but I guarantee you now that I'm thinking about it, if you were to follow the lineage, you could actually trace sparkly vampires back to Bram Stoker's.
Oh, you can. You absolutely can. Yeah. Because you take it back through Anne Rice, and Anne Rice was influenced.
Oh, there's got to be there's got to be there's some missing links there between Anne Rice and Twilight. I'm sorry. I'm just saying that you could go, oh, well, this is only a little, you know, here's 10% different, here's 10% different, here's 10%. Eventually you get to Anne Rice, and then you keep going back and you eventually get to Bram Stoker's. But it definitely doesn't go from Twilight to Anne Rice. I won't allow that. I'm throwing the flag on that one. I'm gonna call penalty on that one. There's got to be a few intermediates in there that slowly degraded to sparkly vampires.
In that lineage, besides Bram Stoker's Dracula, the most influential vampire author was probably Anne Rice.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
I mean, besides Bram, you know, because without Bram Stoker, there's nothing, right? And it's the one that's been made it to the most movies, blah 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 blah.
Right.
But after him, definitely Anne Rice was the most influential vampire writer. Anyway, back to symbols and symbology. It is interesting on that topic how vampires have changed as symbols of evil, right?
Symbols of love interest.
Into symbols of love interest and sexiness, into where, you know, the bastard grandchildren are like sparkly vampires who don't even need to drink human blood. They can drink animal blood.
Yeah. There's nothing sexier than my lover biting into my throat and ripping the flesh off of it and then just killing me while, you know, we're making love. There's literally that's I do that every time we make love. Every time me and my wife make love, I die. She just kills me. It's awesome. Nothing better.
I've never understood it, but that is the evolution.
And she smells like she's been dead for 4 days. So that also turns me on a lot. I really like that putrid, rotting flesh smell. There's nothing more erotic than that to me.
But it is interesting that is how that symbol has changed over the years due to kind of literary evolution.
And Anne Rice is a big link to the romanticizing of the vampires. There's no doubt.
But she would, you know, her books found a fertile audience, which they wouldn't have at the time where vampires were seen as unholy. Right, the period where vampires were all being turned away by crosses and so on, they were feared. You know what I mean? In the Victorian age, they were ugly. They were ugly and they were feared, and then they became pretty and feared.
And I do have at least one link between Anne Rice and Sparkly Vampires, and that's Sookie Stackhouse. She definitely is. She definitely is somewhere between on that evolutionary path. She's definitely, because she's not sparkly vampires, but she definitely ain't Anne Rice. So there's one. I'm just saying we can map this out.
That vampire with his southern accent.
So
I love that TV show.
Well, me and my wife are from Louisiana.
Yeah.
And actually taking them from Georgia, but I lived a long time in Louisiana. My wife's from Louisiana, and she started listening to the Sookie Stackhouse books on audio, and she got about 3 books into it. And I said, "You are no longer allowed to listen to these audiobooks ever again. Like, you are done. You can read them, but you cannot listen to the audiobooks anymore. I'm deleting them from your Audible library," because she literally just fell right back into the Louisiana accent that we had a long time ago. I'm like, nope. We have evolved past that. You are now degrading. And so I forced her to now buy the books and read them instead of listening to them on audio, because she literally just started falling right back into that horrible Louisiana accent.
So I never read the books, but I did watch the series True Blood on HBO. And the things I remember from that from the TV series was like that vampire saying "Sookie," and the southern accent of the main vampire and of Sookie Stackhouse herself, which was just, that is not the accent you expect to come out of the mouth of a vampire. It just isn't.
But in all honesty, why?
It worked. It was great.
Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, come on now. All vampires aren't from Pennsylvania. So,
But it was really funny.
It was. The only thing I remember from it is boobies. That's really the only thing it's the only reason I watched it. I was much younger at the time.
They're actually quite good. The TV series, like, not all of it, not all the seasons that they pushed out, but the first 3 or 4 seasons were actually like really solid viewing.
I'm not even sure I watched one single episode all the way through. Oh. I'm pretty sure I did not.
Okay.
So it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
I also didn't watch the Twilight movies. Not my thing.
I didn't watch those either. That's definitely not my thing.
For me, we talked about Terry Pratchett, and that's really what I use a lot of symbolism for, is in my comedy writing. Mm-hmm. So Fiend Folly has a lot of it. Guards, a lot of it. There's one episode that I really love, where I'm really picking on 5G and cell phone and everything like that. But he shows up with a magical tablet, a magical communication tablet called a Sung Sam, whatever, a S10, I think is what it is, a Sung Sam S10. And or no, I'm sorry, that was the original one. It's a Sung Sam S666 is what it is. And the kind of the symbolism I'm playing with is that I'm picking on 5G and that it rots out your brain and everything like that. But B, I'm also picking on the fact that we buy stuff that we don't need. And so that's exactly what this is about. So like on the 5G side, the old guy is like, there's no way you can't tell me that putting that up to your head is not rotting your brain out. He's like, oh, come on, this is an old wives' tale. And they go, really? You think that's not rotting your brain out? And the camera turns around, it looks up at one of the cell towers, but it's an Eye of Sauron on the top. And so that's their cell towers. And he's like, there's no way that thing is not rotting your brain out with the waves that are coming off of it. And so again, it's a lot of pop culture and a lot of stupid funny. But the part about stuff that we don't need, he's like, yeah, but I can talk to somebody on the other side of the galaxy with this. And he's like, do you know someone on the other side of the galaxy? And he's like, well, I mean, no. Do you even know if anybody lives on the other side of the galaxy? And he's like, well, I mean, no, but if they do, and I did know them, I could talk to them with this. And it's like, kid, you just spent money on stuff you're not going to use. Like, and so that whole episode is literally just about buying stuff that you don't need. The Sung Sam is just one small piece of it. But it's all about, that is the symbolism I'm playing with and tying it back into, our world. Even though there are a couple of guards on a medieval gate, in a magical land, it's still about, you just buy stuff you don't need, guys. Come on.
And I mean that I think is a good kind of summation on it, because symbology can really lift a theme. It can really bring a theme up if you use it well. But you've got to thread it through properly. You can't just introduce it and then be like, and this is what the symbol means. That's not going to work. It needs to be a recurring thing that flows through. And like all plot devices, you need to, plant it, tend it again, and only then can you reap the actual payoff of the symbology.
Yep.
But you also cannot be heavy-handed with symbols. Because if you are heavy-handed with symbols, you come across as preachy, no matter what your theme is, no matter if everybody could agree with your theme could be so universal that everybody agrees with you. Like, I don't know, a theme like murder is bad. And if
or mustard is evil.
Yeah, or what?
Mustard is evil.
Yeah, everybody whatever.
On that.
Yeah. I don't, but yeah, sure. But your theme could be so universal, but if you're too heavy-handed in your symbology, you will come across as preachy, and nobody likes being preached to.
Yep.
So,
and again, I said this before on this podcast. This is why I feel like they've been ruining movies for the last 4 or 5 years, is because every story has an agenda. It's called your theme, but you cannot make a story out of an agenda. So if you're like, I'm going to push this agenda on my fans, and this is how I'm going to do it, you will fail every time.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to be preachy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly like if your symbology becomes the core of your story, you're going to come across as too preachy, too heavy-handed.
Yep.
You want to aim for that sweet spot that Pratchett hit.
Now, and that's where I was going to loop it back around to. Technically, humor can push that bounds a heck of a lot farther than if you're being serious. I mean, obviously, when I'm talking about the Sung Sam Galaxy S666 that can talk to people on the other side of the galaxy, and he's like, you're just wasting your money. Obviously, I'm being pretty damn heavy-handed on the fact that you're just buying stuff that you don't need. But because humor can really push those bounds and not offend the audience. Plus, it's also, the other thing I guess you have to think about is
because the humor lightens it, right?
Yeah.
Because people are laughing while taking in the symbol.
Yeah.
Because they're laughing at like the jokes and so on.
I was just saying, it's also not directed at the reader.
Yeah.
It's directed at one of the other characters, and so that also takes the sting out of it, especially when in the humor standpoint.
And that to me, I think is the core takeaway. You've got to lighten your symbol. Either your symbology has got to be light, like gently applied, so gentle that people who are very literal will probably miss it, or you have to lighten your symbology and your use of it with humor and with satirical writing.
Or you just get lucky, like I've done a bunch of times, and just have people read stuff in that you had no intent of doing. And I know I've said this before on this podcast, but like, I still think when Farmers and Mercenaries came out, and I got so many emails telling me what they thought of the boy's father, and the boy's father was obviously a secret this, or he was obviously going to be, coming to this, or he's going to do this in the future, and he's going to be, and like, no, he's just a farmer, and he's just a really good man. Like, that's it. That's all he is. He's just there to show the reader who raised these two boys when they go off to make their decisions in this story. But man, I got so many emails that were like, obviously he's bigger than what you're obviously going to use him in the future because of what you've done here. And it's like, okay, but no.
It's like Shakespeare. So now Shakespeare has churned out 35 plays, right? So certainly by the end of it, he was probably the best writer of his age at the very minimum, just given the volume that he's changed.
Although it depends, maybe, because there are theories that he didn't write everything that he wrote. But anyway.
I know, but like it was, I don't know, however many hundreds of years ago. I'm not going to go on a rabbit hunt. It has his name on it. It's written by Shakespeare.
That's what I say.
Yeah. So
I just didn't want to exclude any conspiracy theories out there. They're all mad. Like, no. Shakespeare killed JFK, and I can prove it. Like, okay, all right, that's good. We believe you.
The thing is, sometimes, so yes, I'm sure Shakespeare did intend some of the symbology that literary professors will pull out of his work and expound on how, these are all, they're allegories for this, or allegories for that, and implications for madness and so on. And then, I mean, occasionally, he was like, and your mother. I mean, that is actually in one of the plays. So, he was also just a writer sometimes.
So Demetrius says, villain, what hast thou done? And Aaron says, that which thou canst not undo. And Tyrion says, thou hast undone our mother? Villain, I have done thy mother.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's actually got several of them. It's not
an isolated incident.
No, it's not an isolated incident. The yo mama jokes are very, 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 very old. And so he has several times where one character mentions screwing another character's mom. It's just, it's not, and a lot of people don't know that too.
No.
So
I'm sure there's a lot of, I'm sure the Shakespeare did intend for some of the things to be symbology, like, but I'm sure there's also a fair amount of it that literary professors are like, and this is like stands for blah, blah, blah. And Shakespeare was like, man, I was under a deadline. The Queen wanted to see a play and I puked some words on the page. That was what happened there.
I had a heavy night drinking the night before, and that was just the best I could come up with.
My head was pounding and I just needed to churn some text.
So my head was pounding and I didn't want it to be rolling if I didn't get this done. Because that was at a time where writers didn't get paid except for from Patreons.
Yeah. And the Queen was his patron and help him if, he didn't deliver what she wanted.
Yeah. We're probably going to do a couple different podcasts on these topics, as they do get really in depth. They get really, because we didn't really talk about using them and what, the details of like, stuff like that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this meandering, thing. If you guys do have specific questions like about allegories or symbolism or subtext, drop them in the comments below. But yeah, so we're probably gonna have to do some other podcasts on this stuff, but it's just understanding that you don't have to say everything exactly the way it is, and symbolism and subtext and allegories are all different ways that you can use prose to do more than what the words are actually saying themselves.
And I think that is a good note on which to end this podcast. So we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.